usually assume that what people believe about the news, that people see the news as factual information. Therefore, all of the solutions have focused on helping people to identify when certain news sources might not be providing factual information. And so a lot of the solutions have focused on fact checking. And so here are examples of a lot of projects that we have been seeing to fight disinformation. We have the Trust Project, the Credibility Coalition. A lot of these projects, what they're focusing on is on guiding people in order to tell them, okay, this is how much you can trust this news source. This is how much you can trust this other news source. And so they focus on providing trust indicators. Additionally, we have seen a lot of research that has focused on helping people to be able to understand just how much maybe fake news or disinformation a particular site is sharing. And so these mechanisms have focused on developing techniques through which we can understand, okay, how subjective is this new report? How much sentiment does it go into this new report? Because usually you want news reports to be very factual. And again, all of these solutions have focused on the premise that when people are sharing this, are reading the news, people believe that the news holds factual information. Another of these solutions has been fact-checking websites. These fact-checking websites, again, go out of their way in order to tell people if a particular news report is actual or not. An example was Snoop's. Another one actually that emerged in Mexico is called Verificado. However, despite these amazing advances that we have made, society is still plagued with disinformation. And this has had a chilling effect on citizen participation, and it can also undermine our democracies. And so part of the problem perhaps is that most of these solutions focus on being an objective judge of people, of the news. They believe that people need to have a godlike source that is telling them, yes, you can trust this source, or no, you cannot trust this source. But the problem is that it's unclear whether these solutions actually meld with how people are engaging with the news, especially news sharing disinformation. So I argue that in order to design effective solutions, we need to first understand how people are engaging with news that has already been flagged as being a producer of disinformation. We need to understand why is it that people are engaging in these types of news sources. So in my research, I use social theories to analyze how people engage with news that has this information, and I then use the knowledge to design information systems to fight disinformation. A little bit of background about myself. Within my research, I have had significant success. So I was named one of the 35 innovators under 35 by the MIT Tech Review. I also recently won a $2.5 million NSF grant. I have published over 50 research papers in top venues. I published a lot in CSCW, WWW, CHI. These are primarily HCI conferences. My research has also been covered in the New York Times, the BBC, and the Deutsche Welle. Additionally, I have created a number of collaborations with government agencies in order to help these different government agencies to be able to create solutions through which they can fight disinformation and have overall better communication with citizens. So here I am collaborating with Mexico's Ministry of Foreign Affairs. We were able to create a collaboration actually between UNAM and Mexico's Ministry of Foreign Affairs to design technology through which we can have impact at scale with the government. I have also collaborated with different local governments, for instance, the government of West Virginia, where I'm also developing different tools to help rural workers to develop their digital skills and not fall for disinformation. And so in this talk, I'm going to be first presenting my research on understanding how people are engaging with disinformation. Then I'm going to present around systems to fight disinformation. And then finally, I'm going to present briefly about my vision about what is the future in this space. So first, let's start on an analysis about how people engage with disinformation. So here I'm interested in understanding what exactly are these news sources doing to engage people to participate in these news sources that have already been flagged as being producers of disinformation. What are the most effective techniques that these news sites are adopting? For this purpose, I identify the news sites that have been flagged as being producers of disinformation. I uncover the techniques that they are using to drive participation, and then I identify what are the techniques that are the most effective. I focus on two case studies. The first case study is a Reddit site that was called The Donald. This site has actually now been removed from Reddit because it was producing too much disinformation. So this subreddit was a subreddit that focused on creating content, pro content for President Donald Trump. And this was a site that was sharing news reports about what was going on with Donald Trump and everything that related to Donald Trump. However, this news site had also been flagged as being a producer of disinformation. And it was now even removed from Reddit because it was flagged as being a producer of disinformation. The other case study that I study are Facebook groups that have focused on sharing what is going on in Mexico with relation to the drug cartels. And a lot of these groups have called themselves Courage for X. They're called Courage for X because they're allegedly citizens who are fighting against the drug cartels, or militia groups who are fighting against the drug cartels. And they're calling up for citizens to have courage to get up and fight against these drug cartels. However, a lot of these platforms have also been flagged as being producers of disinformation and have also been banned and removed from social media. So here, for instance, you can see about how a lot of these accounts were removed from social media platforms because they were flagged as being producers of disinformation. And so I grab these two case studies to understand how are people engaging with these news sites that have already been flagged as being producers of disinformation? What are the most effective techniques that these news sites use to engage people in disinformation? I collect all of the Reddit posts from the Donald. This is the Donald. I collected over 16 million posts and comments. I did the same for the Facebook group of the malicious, and I collected all of their Facebook posts and comments. This research was published in ICWSM. This research was published in CSCW. And so next, once I had collected the information, I was interested in understanding, well, how exactly are these news sites calling people into action? How are they engaging them? And so for this purpose, I collected all of their reports. I then identified their articles that were calling people into action. So they had action verbs in which they were calling people directly into action. I then used different clustering techniques in order to group the different calls to action that they had. And then I analyzed what each cluster meant in order to understand it. So overall, through this process, I identified that these news sites were using three main strategies to produce disinformation. The first strategy is the slang that I'm calling the slang strategy. So they created their own language, and within their own language, which we're calling slang, they started calling people into action to participate with them for their cause. The slang likely helped them to create an identity, so only the insiders could understand what was going on, and this helped them to create an identity of who they were. So this is an example of calls to action that were shared in the Donald. So here, notice they have they have different slang. They call themselves, for instance, deplorables. They also call Hillary Killery. And here they're calling people to action. And also here, this is an icon that they created, which is called Pepe the Frog. And so they identify as the deplorables who are represented by Pepe the Frog. And so here, for instance, they're calling people into action to create Photoshop memes against Hillary. This is another example of calls to action that use the slang. These were made by the militia groups. And here the militia groups, they also had their own slang where they were having different names. For instance, they're saying here that people need to call the PF. PF is like the term that they define for Policía Federal, for the federal police. They're also calling in the comunitarios. This is how they're calling in the citizens. And so basically they have their different nicknames as well for these different groups, the doctor, Papa Pitufo. And so through this slang, they create a vocabulary that only insiders can understand. And then once they create this vocabulary through which insiders can understand it, they're then calling these people into action. Another type of strategy that we found were just posts that were direct, but that were very much focused on becoming viral. Here, they were using social media as opportunity structures in order to spread their messages. Now, something to consider is that because these groups are sharing disinformation, they actually have a lot of opposition. They have the platforms, they have also the government who are against them. And so because of that, it becomes highly important for them to be able to viralize what they are doing. And so here's an example of a call to action that focused on becoming viral. Here they shared a photo of President Donald Trump, and they said, the official portrait of our president should be the #1 most upvoted post in Reddit's history. Here, the call to action was just very direct and calling people to just act upon this. Here's another example of a call to action. Here again, they're asking, the militias are now asking to viralize certain content. And this again, it was important for them to viralize their content because they have a lot of opposition. They need to widely share the message that they have. The next one is the historian style. The historian style was a call to action that first provided great detailed context about what was going on. They provided a framing about who were the enemies, who were the heroes. And so, for instance, in the case of the Donald, they even created manuals where they explained in detail what does Hillary Clinton's emails mean? What does this event represent? Who exactly are the enemies? Now, notice that here, in a certain way, these types of call to action resemble conspiracy theories because they are helping people to connect the dots around allegedly what is going on in a political space. They are creating a whole narrative around what certain events mean. Now, the militias had similar posts to that. They had very lengthy posts where, again, they framed what different events meant, who were the enemies, who were the bad guys, who were the good guys. Now, once I had understood the different strategies that were used in these spaces, I was next interested in understanding, okay, which one is the most effective? And so here in the x-axis, we have, each of these circles represents one of the posts from Reddit. And the x-axis represents the number of comments that the post received. The y-axis, the number of upvotes that the post received. Posts are color-coded based on whether they belong to the going viral, the slang, or the historical context. What overall we're seeing is that the ones around providing historical context were in general the ones that obtained the most participation for people. So these were the ones that in general obtained the most number of comments and the most number of upvotes. So and now the same we have here a similar thing for the militia groups. The x-axis shows the number of comments that a post received. The y-axis denotes the number of likes that the post received, and the size of the circle denotes how much the post was shared. And overall, here again, the post that received the most engagement belonged to the historian style. This is the conspiracy theory style. So overall, what we're seeing is that within this space, using conspiracy theories was the most effective way for engaging people to participate in news sites that were sharing disinformation. And so I argue that based on this, I argue that solving the disinformation problem is not just about fact-checking. We need to address people conspiratorial thinking. Now, I see a lot of different research opportunities in this space. On one hand, I think that it can be interesting to understand what conspiracy theories become the most popular, how do conspiracy theories evolve, what different types of participation do these different types of conspiracy theories obtain, and how is it different per social media platform? I have been advancing different research within this space, studying now, okay, so how is the Latinx population targeted within these types of political disinformation campaigns? I have done this research with a number of different civic institutions involving the Atlantic Council, the National Electoral Institute, the Aspen Institute. Now that I have explained these different things, let us go into systems for fighting disinformation. So we have overall understood that the most important thing that we need to do when we're thinking about how to fight disinformation, especially disinformation that is within news sites, is to address people's conspiratorial thinking. So research has found that by prompting people to focus on aspiration and solutions to problems, they are less likely to promote conspiracy theories. So based on this, I propose the following architecture. We're going to identify the people who are participating in a conspiracy theory, and then we are going to nudge them. And instead of having them continue staying within the conspiracy theory, we're going to nudge them to do other activities. And so this way they can use their energy on other activities instead of continuing to discuss the conspiracy theory, which might not actually lead them to anything productive. So when I'm designing these tools, I focus on different things. On one hand, it's important for me to bootstrap off of the applications that citizens already know and use. Why? Because citizens have limited time. I don't want them to have to learn to use yet another tool. So for this purpose, I use social media bots. I use social media bots because this way people can continue using the same tools that they're always using. For instance, they're on social media, and the bot, what it's going to do is going to find the people who are engaging in a conspiracy theory, and it's going to guide them to focus on something else. So here I'm using reinforcement learning to learn the type of communication strategy that the bot should use in order to get people to stop participating in conspiracy theory and instead focus on something else. These are the different strategies that the bot learns to use, and the bot is going to focus on learning which one of these is going to be the most effective. The first strategy is just the bot being upfront and direct. And so maybe the bot asks people about, hey, I noticed you were discussing the militias in Mexico and how they're infiltrated by the government. Would you happen to know about what is going on, what type of cities you might have in this state of Mexico? So what the bot does is that it reaches out to people and it starts to get them to focus on other things. So the other type of strategy, and the first strategy is just the bot being direct. The second strategy is the bot sharing solidarity quotes. So the bot goes out, is direct, but then shares a solidarity quote. For instance, when spiders unite, they can tie down a lion. Notice that these different strategies are based on collective action theory about how we can get people to participate in a cause. The second type of strategy is, again, the bot asking people to participate in another cause different from their conspiracy theory, but now the bot is going to tell them what they gain from the participation. Finally, we have another strategy where the bot tells people what they will lose if they don't participate in the cause. So now that I have this, I'm interested in first identifying, well, can we use these bots to nudge people to propose solutions instead of engaging in conspiracies? And so I put out my bot into operation for around 2 weeks, and I had it send out messages to people who are engaging in conspiracy theories, and I wanted to see how did people respond to the bot engaging them? What was the most effective strategy? And here's the results. So this is on the x-axis, I have the different strategies, and the y-axis is how much people were participating with the bot. Overall, what I was finding was that the direct strategy was the most effective, and was the most effective in getting people to participate. And so overall, less manipulative communication strategies were the most effective. they were the most effective for getting people to participate. Next, I was interested in knowing, well, are people engaging with on-topic content? Are they just maybe sending trash to the bot or not saying really anything to the bot? And so I categorized all the content that the bot, that people replied to the bot, and I studied whether or not it was on topic or off topic. So here is an example of an on topic message where somebody is providing a solution about how they can fight disinformation. This is an example of an off topic message where people are basically maybe telling the bot that they shouldn't respond to robots. And so overall, what we're finding is that less manipulative bots, this is bots that were direct, drove more people to participate in solutions, focus on solutions instead of staying stuck in their conspiracy theories. And overall, we're seeing that with this type of architecture, we can nudge people to start to do things that are more productive than continue to engage in conspiracy theories. I see a lot of, again, research opportunities in this space, studying, for instance, the long-term effect of nudging and how it can affect how people participate. I also think that we could study different gaming mechanisms. I have been studying these types of techniques and using it to fight now visual bias. So, for instance, maybe certain news reports are reporting certain protests in a certain way. And so I think that it can be interesting to use this type of architecture to now nudge people to get them to talk about visual biases that might exist in news reports. I've also been exploring nudging people who might have now specialized knowledge to create articles in Wikipedia. These articles in Wikipedia are, and so through this, we can now use the specialized knowledge that these people who are engaging in conspiracy theories have in order to get them to produce high quality content. I found that through this, I was able to actually get people to produce articles for Wikipedia, and they have lasted over almost 2 years on Wikipedia, and the community has also been engaging with them. I've also been exploring the space about nudging people within other spaces, for instance, for the future of work. So many times you have employers who engage in conspiracy theories around their workers. And so now here I'm using this type of architecture to study how I can get employers to be fairer with workers. So overall, I was able to present around, okay, what is happening when in disinformation around news sources? How do we create systems to fight disinformation? And I'm just going to briefly talk about the future to fight disinformation that I see. So I think that it'll be interesting to create scientific frameworks in order to study disinformation campaigns across countries and across social media platforms. My goal is to develop a scientific framework where we can design principles around disinformation campaigns, understand what type of campaigns are more effective than others, how does it play out within different cultures, also within different social media platforms. Here I have been developing this type of research with my PhD students. This is Claudia Flores and this is Carlos Toxley, who have recently won fellowships from Facebook and Twitch precisely studying these principles. Next, I'm also interested in designing interfaces to fight disinformation across countries. Again, right now I have been focused, for instance, maybe studying my disinformation campaigns within one particular country and designing interfaces for these countries. But now I'm interested in thinking about this globally and thinking about how does culture affect the type of interfaces that we build. Here I have also been developing this technology, especially within the Global South. I have been working with different civic organizations to start to think about how do we fight disinformation at scale, and how can we do it on the ground, especially now also in rural areas. This is rural Guatemala, where I participated as an observer for the OEA around its presidential elections. Next, I'm also interested in addressing conspiratorial thinking and disinformation in the workplace, and overall helping workers to be able to better identify when they might be targeted in disinformation campaigns, and helping also employers to realize when they're falling for conspiracy theories. Here I have recently, as I mentioned before, I recently won a grant from the National Science Foundation where I'm studying how we can help rural workers to develop their digital skills so that they're not falling for conspiracy theories and also not falling for disinformation campaigns. So overall, what I want you to take away from this talk is that solving the disinformation problem is not just about fact-checking. It requires nudging people from their conspiratorial thinking. And so thank you. Special thanks especially to my awesome PhD students and collaborators. It has been really an honor to be here. I'm very excited. I'm really excited that you guys are organizing these types of events. Thank you. And here is my information in case anybody wants to keep in touch.
Well, thank you so much once again for amazing talk. I think I personally learned so many things, although I'm doing PhD in fake news detection. So amazing talk. So now we are switching to question answering section. So I will be just like informing you the question people are asking on different platforms, and then I will request you to respond them one by one, please.
Excellent.
So basically, so you see, like now, normally people have been talking about linguistic patterns, understanding, for example, fake news tends to have more punctuations. Fake news tend to have more like sentiment words. For instance, they just like those words who try to urge people emotionally. For example, somehow they attack sentiment. So what is your opinion? This is my question. So what is your opinion, like how natural language processing can help to identify, regardless of fact checking, to spot fake news?
Yeah, I think that it could be interesting to especially study the type of sentiment that is used within conspiracy theories, and better understand how that sentiment plays out and how we should nudge people. So, for instance, maybe a conspiracy theory has been created around pedophilia, and it's making people feel angry. I'm interested in understanding, okay, given that sentiment that they're promoting people to have, how might we now nudge people so that we can kind of create interventions? Because I think that one of the biggest things is that the conspiracy theories and a lot of this fake news, as you mentioned, they're polarizing people. And so I think that we need to understand what are the best ways in which we should intervene within that polarization, and make people also aware that they are being polarized, and maybe they're being manipulated in a certain direction. So I'm interested in understanding interventions within this space.
Perfect. I think the one of the other question is defining fake news. So you see, like a fake news, the definition of fake news is very versatile. So everyone has his own definition. So what is your opinion about how we can elaborate more the word fake news so everyone can easily understand?
Yeah, I think that for me, it's not so much in terms of defining fake news, because I think that for me, what's important is understanding that news reports, that fake news that has conspiracy theories is the most effective in engaging people. So news reports that are explaining in detail, allegedly, what is going on, that they're connecting the dots to people around what is going on in the world allegedly, that is what is getting people to be the most engaged and participate the most. And so I would say that instead of focusing on a complete definition, I think that we need to understand that explaining to people what is happening is important, and that might be a way in which we can fight fake news. Because I think that a lot of solutions assume, oh, people are so stupid for believing this fake news. But it's not so much that they're stupid; it's more that they have maybe been indoctrinated to believe that narrative. And so I think that it's more around understanding, okay, what type of fake news is the most effective in getting people to participate? What my research is showing is that it's fake news that explains to people in detail the ecosystem. And so I think that when you're thinking about creating interventions, it is also you do also need to have clear communication strategies so that you can fight that disinformation. Really explain to people why, no, this was not, for instance, maybe a fraud, an electoral fraud, and it was not because of this and this and this. And so just having very clear communication strategies, I think, is important. And I think that more than defining, for instance, certain terms, we should maybe think more about what are the best ways to get people to not engage with those types of information that are not accurate. And I think that in order to do that, we need to first understand why are they engaging in that.
Okay. The another question is, as you mentioned about interaction with bots, and you also show like you have been like making such bots, so to understand like public opinion and also like assuming the behavior. So the question is, must people be aware that they are interacting with bots for the nudging technique?
Yes, that's a great question. So given that we are engaging people we're driving them to stop participating in a conspiracy theory and helping them to now be productive, we're getting, you could say, labor out of people. It is important to help people to know, it's extremely important for people to know that they're interacting with a bot and not a human. And especially because we don't want to lie to people. So if we're arguing that we want people to stop participating in conspiracy theories, it becomes very important to be transparent and be upfront. And I think that was one of the reasons why people were upset with bots that were manipulative in a certain way, that use different strategies. And so I think that if you're working with bots, it's extremely important to be transparent.
So so you see, like now people are talking about explainable AI. So right now, like the new entire field is opening now. So everyone is talking about, okay, we need to explain how this algorithm works so everyone can understand, to avoid the negative effect of the technology. So now we have GPT-2, 3. So now we have language generating models. So the question is whether writing fake news or identifying fake news is easy. Which one is easier?
Oh, so you're saying that how do we identify fake news, or what is?
So the question is, so now we have language models that can generate language, right? So now we have bots that can write very nice fake news. So the question is what is your opinion on writing fake news is easy task or detecting fake news is easy task?
Oh, I see. I think actually that's one of the things that I think is actually the most dangerous is written text that is created by bots, because that's actually very hard to detect that it was not created by a human, more so than, and I think that, for instance, when we're thinking about deep fakes, etc., we're always thinking about deepfakes in terms of video content, but you can also generate it with textual content. And I think that there is a lot that we need to study in that space, because as you mentioned, where it might also be that in certain social media platforms, when that type of text is shared, it's harder to detect. For instance, maybe on Twitter, it's harder to detect because you have smaller amounts of text that people can share. Maybe on Facebook, where people are accustomed to sharing a larger number of text messages, or even on Instagram, for instance, it might be harder to detect. It might be easier to detect when you have bots. Just because you have more information that is presented. But so I think that there is a huge opportunity in terms of studying, being able to detect fake news, especially fake news that is generated just with text, and then understanding as well on what platforms is it harder to detect it.
Okay, great. Thank you so much. Another question is, people also are misinformed on the back of national narratives that are sometimes unfactual and biased, thus solving large-scale conspiracies, not bringing us back to the fact-checking.
Can you repeat that? Can you repeat that question? Sorry.
Yeah, so the question is, sometimes people are informed that the national narratives is not factually correct and also biased. Now, as you have been talking about conspiracy theories, so the question is, does solving large-scale conspiracies not bringing us back to the fact-checking?
So
Did you get the question?
Oh, so what I understand is that they're saying that if we're addressing conspiracy theories, isn't it going back into fact checking? So the thing is that no, because I'm not focused on fact checking or checking if a conspiracy theory is true or not. What I'm focused on is I see that people are engaging in something that certain maybe a company or others have flagged as being fake news. I just assume that okay, they're engaging in that. I'm not focused on fact checking it. I now focus on guiding people to do something else with their time. So instead of continuing to discuss the fake news, I'm guiding them to now do something else. For instance, write a Wikipedia article. Instead of continuing to discuss that conspiracy theory. So I'm not so much focused on giving people facts about why that news might be fake or not. Instead, I'm just guiding them to do something else. And because I also assume,
great, very nice point. Yeah, please.
Oh, yes. Sorry. I also assume that, for instance, in the case of the Donald and also in the case of the militias, people have been informed that those were spaces that were sharing disinformation, and yet they still continue to participate. And so I assume that people are not going to care if I tell them, hey, this probably has fake news. They have already been informed, and yet they continue to participate. And I would argue that they continue to participate because of other reasons. They don't care if they have facts or not.
Perfect. As you also mentioned, like during your presentation, like so you have been talking about conspiracy theories, bars, and some other methods to identify and spotting fake news. The question is how to make sure the call to action points into a right direction. So how we can ensure that the direction we are trying to do to address that problem is appropriate. That will definitely tackle disinformation.
Yeah. Right now, I'm actually working within that research space because it's a great question because it's not at all simple. So it's not right now we don't have a clear way for ensuring quality within these collective action systems. And so what I'm focused on is understanding the different ways in which we should organize crowds in order to ensure quality. And you could argue that quality can be measured in terms of how well they're fighting disinformation. Or for instance, maybe based on the number of people that you're able to engage in fighting disinformation, or the number of people that you can reach in a certain campaign. And so I think that we still have a lot of work to do in that space. That's also a very interesting question.
Great. It's also like a question, like, so as you also mentioned, like, it is very important to educate people to understanding, to teach them, like, to how to identify a fake news. So what do you think, except fake social networks, how we can educate people? Like, do we need to have some campaigns to let people know, okay, if you find these things, just like identify as a fake news? So what is your opinion, how we can educate people in a better way?
Yeah. So some of the ways in which we have been focused this education is, on one hand, facilitating micro tasks. So people don't have a lot of time to learn. They're not going to take a lengthy course for learning about disinformation. So we've been aiming to break it down into micro tasks through which we can make it easier for people to learn about disinformation. And so that's one thing. Make it into a very casual activity. The other thing that we're doing is that we have also done a lot of interviews with different types of populations in order to better understand their needs. And so, for instance, for rural communities, some of the things that we're finding is, okay, again, they don't have a lot of time, and time when people are not working is time when they're not making money. And so people, if we want them to take any type of course, we need to pay them. And so the second thing that we're doing is that we are actively paying these individuals to be part of our we're actively paying these individuals to participate with us in this research, and so and we're educating them through these payments. We also bootstrap off of public libraries because we found that public libraries are a great space where people can have access to internet and also technology, especially within West Virginia, for instance, where they might not have a lot of money. And so that has been helpful in order to empower these different groups to be able to access education. And so those are some of the things that we have been doing. We've also opened up help tech desks where anyone can just come on in and ask their technical questions without being scared or without having any barriers.
Great. Amazing. Another question is whether the methods to identify to teach people, uneducated people, especially your research is primarily focused on rural areas. So can we apply the same methodologies in domestic areas where large population is educated?
Yes, but so right now we are developing these techniques for urban and rural. And we are aiming to understand what are the differences between urban and rural. I think that some of the main differences to consider is for the urban folk, for the rural folks, they have much less access to opportunities, and so they do have to be constantly working in order to make a decent living. And so that was why we turned all of the courses into paid opportunities. The second thing to consider is as well that for rural, you're not going to have a large number of people ever that are going to participate. And people are going to have very different needs and backgrounds. And so you would need to have specialized courses for each different type of subpopulation within the rural area. And so that's hard. The third thing that I want to mention, but mainly those things.
Okay, yeah. So another question is the data for your studies available to other researchers? Like, can other researchers use your data, like to do
Yes.
some research? Is it publicly
Yes.
available?
Yes. So we have, for some of our research papers, we have created websites where you can download the data. You need to sign an agreement with us, and this is related to the governance of the data from the university. And so there you can just access. You sign an agreement with us around the data, and we'll share it with you. If you're interested in doing any type of studies with our data, I would say email me and I can help you. But yeah, we have right now very interesting data around Reddit, Facebook, also Twitter, which might be very interesting to do different studies.
Thank you so much. Another question is about, as I mentioned earlier, the definition of fake news. So now the question is, how do you identify the difference between misinformation and disinformation?
Okay, so disinformation is incorrect information that is shared with the purpose of sharing that incorrect information. And misinformation is just incorrect information that was shared, but you didn't do it with an intent to harm anyone. It was just a mistake. So, for instance, an example of misinformation is maybe there was an earthquake and you tell people that 50 people were killed in the earthquake. But it was because you didn't get the report correctly, and it turned out that it was maybe 60 people instead of 50. But you shared that incorrect information because that was what everyone said at the time. And so that's misinformation. Disinformation is incorrect information that is shared with a purpose. So for instance, I might share, Ricardo Anaya, which was a political candidate in Mexico. Ricardo Anaya stole billions out of the public universities in Mexico. And maybe I know that information is incorrect, but I'm sharing it because I want to gain something, maybe politically. Maybe I want to share a campaign against Anaya so that I'm better positioned than he is. And so that's disinformation.
Perfect. Thank you so much. I think like that is one of the many clear definitions of understanding. So I think the main difference is intent.
Yes.
If you are intentionally writing to gain something, that is disinformation. And if you have no intention to harm something, that can be called as misinformation due to any reasons, like because the intent is not involved in that part. Okay, so I think we don't have any more questions. Once again, I'm very thankful to you for joining us and having amazing talk.
Yeah, thank you.
If someone will have any question, certainly they can reach you. So once again, thank you so much, and it was really an honor for you to have you on board. Thank you very much again.
Thank you. It was also an honor. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
Yeah, and we'll be in contact for.
Yeah, I'm just asking.
This was great. And really nice questions, actually.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, actually, now like people have been talking. Yeah, I mean, they're like all expert, and they were asking. Actually, like whenever like I talk about fake news, they always ask me like, okay, now first define what is fake news. So the way I define fake news is any information that happened before, and now I'm presenting with adding some false information. We also have some University of Michigan. Her name is Rada Mikhaila. Maybe
nice.
you know her. So she